I'm giving my editor a break because it's their birthday this weekend, so everybody say happy birthday, Waves, because it's their birthday. So thank you. Thank you for editing my really long format, awful, rambly videos. It means a lot to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But um, that means that you all watching this video get to deal with no editing and a stream of consciousness that comes from my unorganized thought process and brain, so get ready for that. But it's just like the olden days. I made this cool little board for y'all. Brandon left a really cool note to let you guys know that I'm very strong, but I made this cool board for y'all so you guys can see how I digest media. My dog is also gonna snore, so sorry about that. And I'm gonna backtrack really quick. This is how I digest all media, not just video games, but books and TV and movies. And it's typically for directors or writers or creators that I can tell there's like an overall thesis to like their work. So for example, if you have somebody like Ridley Scott who is constantly making movies about artificial life forms and androids and meeting your creator and theology and God and religion, that's like his central thesis. That's the thing that interests him, that he wants to create stuff about. He's motivated by, man's pursuit for their creator. So there's like an overall, thesis or thing that keeps him up late at night thinking about the world. And I feel like Miyazaki has that too. And a good way that we can understand the overall thesis or the core of the message is understanding his language. So he speaks to us in his own language through a series of symbols that he's like defining for us while we're playing the game. And these symbols, in movies, you can have directors, or even in books, you can have writers that are very obtuse about the symbols that they use. You kind of have to get a vibe about them. But then there are directors that are very blatant about the symbols they use. They're very like forthright with like what something represents. And Miyazaki is that way. He'll flat out tell you like, oh, this resembles this, or this represents this, or this stands for this. And so in this chart, I have put a bunch of green sticky notes that outright say, like an item description that says, this stands for this. This stands for this, or like characteristics. So for example, across all the games, dragons are seen as prehistoric creatures. They're immortal. They're immortal because of their scales. They represent the ancient or the natural world, so they're typically around before mankind can kind of create their political, spiritual systems. And they have an affiliation with gravel, rocks, the arch trees, and all of that stuff. So they're kind of like the beings that represent the earth before man's divine order kind of like slips into the storyline. So, when a creator has like a consistent message across all of his games, it's like cool, because then now every time I see a dragon in a Miyazaki game, I'll know, oh, this guy is probably immortal and very, very old, very ancient, very prehistoric, and probably predates mankind. So that way I can build up that language without having to look up the definition in like a dictionary, or, for example, in an item description. So I think it's very helpful to have played Miyazaki's other games because you start to build up that language that he has throughout all of his games, and you get to see how these different symbols interact with each other, because he'll take, for example, a dragon that is immortal and put it in different situations so you can see how it interacts in each kind of situation, or with each kind of political system. So it's really neat. And I feel like you can do this with just about any form of media. You can do this, like I mentioned before, with books or with TV shows or with movies. If you have a favorite director, you can really like parse the things that they like to communicate with. And I want to make this board public for everybody to mess around with because, as you can see, it is not complete, and I have quite a few more things I need to fill out, but I want to see what the community's favorite Miyazaki symbols are and the things that he uses across the games. So once I do get this live, I'll probably make a follow-up video and just like update this for y'all. And let you know on like Twitter or social media that like it's live and free, ready to use. But I'm gonna go through the ones that are my favorite that are throughout the game series. These are the obvious ones, like dragons are representative of immortality in the natural world, whereas snakes are representative of mortality and mankind. They are short-lived. They're often perceived as being gluttonous. They're associated with mankind's sin. There is Dark Souls 2's symbolism, I've noticed, is a little bit inconsistent compared to the other games. I also do notice that Sekiro is a little bit fast and loose with some of the symbolism because it's pulling from a lot of Japanese mythology. So Miyazaki will put quotes in the game, obviously, that let you know that yes, like this big ass snake doesn't necessarily represent mankind the same way that it did in the previous games. He's very good about making sure that like you know if there's a divergence from his symbol usage. But there's also some really cool folklore about like white serpents and what they stand for in Japanese mythology, so that's a whole other thing. But some of my favorite ones that he's used throughout his games, I would say eyes and blindness are super cool because they have a lot to do with perception, obviously, and insight, and how much like kind of non-physical cosmic knowledge, like things that aren't necessarily in the physical realm, if we're blind or if we blind ourselves to them, we'll typically be able to like hear them or see a distant light, or it's very like eldritchy, and it's like you have to open up your mind, you have to have more eyes inside of your mind, or you have to eat more eyeballs like the Shabriri grapes to be able to comprehend this like cosmic eldritchy knowledge. But one of my favorite things about this is Miyazaki started to use eyes in Elden Ring, obviously the same way that he did in Bloodborne, but with Milena's eye being closed and her forgetting about Destined Death up until the point in which she opens her eye, and she kind of like recalls her like purpose. That is actually in reference to the way that he uses eyes back in Demon Souls. We have something called eye stones, which effectively talk about like our own internal karma. It's like we use eye stones the same way that we use fingers in Elden Ring. We use them to be able to go between worlds, and it is able to project our spirit or our soul between these different worlds. So there's this like imagery with like this inner eye and the soul and everything like that, and Mileena is burned and bodiless. She's just a soul, and she doesn't have like a perception of herself. And so when she gets her eye opened and she gets closer to the Erd Tree, where I'm assuming she's bound, we get to see her eye open up. And we also get to see her eye open up when the Erd Tree is like fully annihilated. It's like she's unsealed. She's fully aware of who she is and what she's got to do. So I thought that was super cool. I love that. I love seeing how his like symbolism across all of his games like meld together and like grow with each iteration of his work. Like it gets more and more sophisticated. I love that. I also really love Wolves and Shadows. These are my two. I want to say that this is also, and Hands and Arms. Hands and Arms are also really good too, because that's like mankind's sin. It's like the desire or like the need to grasp for something. And when somebody's arm grows out of control or swells out of control, or like the sculptor in Sekiro, his arm gets cut off to spread the his like hatred and his wrath. They descend into demonhood when like their arm is out of control. But we actually see the opposite with Malenia in Elden Ring, where she actually lets go of her prosthesis, and you see this like really beautiful imagery of her blossoming into like this lotus amidst this like battlefield. So she's like experiencing, you know, she's experienced love and compassion for her little brother, and she's experienced suffering through this fight that's happening, and she's seen all the bad things in life, and the good things, and she's letting go of everything, and she's fully like kind of ascending into godhood in that moment. And so she's losing her arm in that sense. So there's multiple ways that like the hands and the arms can represent, either letting go of humanity or ascending past humanity, like descending. But it seems like hands have a lot to do with blasphemy and sin if they grow out of control or if they get too misshapen. And then Wolves and Shadows, something I wanted to talk to in regard to Malenia, something that I love is that all wolves throughout all of his games are protectors, and they typically always protect gravesites, and they always protect royal families, so, or like a significant person. Though there's a significant person that dies, they'll typically follow their masters by posting up at their gravesite. So we see this in Dark Souls 3. There's the old Wolf of Farron that's obviously protecting the graves of the dead, but there's also the Valor Heart. Is that the... Yeah, the Valor Heart in the DLC, in the Painted World DLC. The wolf and the warrior are guarding his grave. The Shadows of Yharnam, they're super interesting because they're not depicted as wolves, but they're depicted as shadows, and they protect the queen. There's like a little thing that says that the rune resonates with servants of the queen, carrier of the child of blood, who yearn for their queen's blood with little hope. But yeah, they like to post up near the queen, or they are posted up in a graveyard as well. So there's like a lot of really interesting things. We like consistently see, okay, like these wolves and these shadows are protecting people, but it's not until Sekiro that you hear the term shadows die twice, and you play as a character named Wolf, who is the bodyguard for the Emperor. And when you talk to the sculptor who gives you his prosthetic, he calls it a fitting fang for a one-armed wolf. And I thought that was really cool because we actually see Malenia carry on this tradition of being somewhat of a wolf or a shadow to Miquella. And I feel like there's been a lot of questions within the community of like, well, where's Malenia and Miquella's baleful shadows? But they're not serving the Greater Will anymore. They're serving the Halig Tree, so they wouldn't actually have a baleful shadow or a wolf. They could have possibly killed theirs, maybe, but it seems like Malenia has stepped up to become the wolf of Miquella, or to become the shadow of Miquella. And I thought that was a really cool reference, that she's kind of become that bodyguard or protector. We can infer that from her character and her prosthetic, but also there's this imagery of the sculptor and the Buddha and trying to let go of his trauma, his like wartime trauma, letting go of his arm, letting go of his fang, but he's unable to do so. But we see Malenia being able to do so. I don't want to read too much into this. This could just be me like going way too ham on the symbolism, because this isn't stated anywhere in the game. But a scarlet or a red lotus is typically symbolic of love and compassion. And I find that really beautiful because we also see we see Morgott shed his omen horns after our fight. And if you read about his lore, he's able to reconcile with the Erd Tree, even though it's an organism that the Greater Will damns him. Like, it's not the tree who damns him, it's the religion that sees their kind as, like, wrong. Even though he was born in oppression, he was able to still love the tree anyway. He was able to reconcile his pain and embrace love. And I really feel like there's this imagery of, like, him ascending past that to, out of demonhood, back to the Erd Tree. There's this really sweet imagery of love in a lot of these stories. And I know that like sometimes Souls games can be very like sad on the surface, but honestly there is a lot of like hope and forgiveness and healing in the games too. So yeah, I'm gonna put this out there. I want y'all to post your favorite reoccurring symbols in the comments if you can remember any. There's like maidens, there's the moon, which is like femininity and sorcery and birthing. We even got the moon presence here. But yeah. Another really cool one is dolls too. I've noticed that like people will often make dolls of an idealized version of an NPC that's like long past. So for example, The doll in Bloodborne is supposed to be Lady Maria, but it's this like hyper feminine, like incorrect version of her that Gearman is like fantasizing about. And then the Fool's Idol was put there to deceive or deceive the people that were in the Tower of Latria. You know, Ronnie is running around in Rena's body, calling herself Rena to people that don't know her. So there's this like imagery of deception and yearning for these dolls that I really love. But yeah, it's cool. There's so much cool stuff. Let's go. Oh, and here's like, I got the cool image of the sculptor's arm exploding with flame. Even after he cut it off, it still existed within him, you know? But yeah. Anyway, post your stuff. Thank you for watching. Okay, bye.